The thing I have to do is get this set up for automated. Okay, if folks want to sign in on the hack doc, that'd be great. I see Tasia's going to beat us to it. And I will paste that in our Slack channel or whatever Zoom channel and try to keep the rest of the conversations captured in the hack doc that has a life. So I'm going to try to do something a little different with this hack doc. What I was going to do was copy the weekly notes and make each one a discussion that's captured in perpetuity, forever, in the various repos. So just as an example, and there'll be a link at the top that says, here's where, if you don't see the content here, this is where it is, because Hack has a practical limit on how much content it can manage as you're typing it, because it's trying to constantly index everything. Okay, so the first item on the list was, are we at a point to have a release, whether that's an RC release, a 1.0 release, a draft? That's the other question. Just to put some context to it, the ref types is something we, as doing Notary, we saw a pattern that was a generic usage pattern of being able to add content to a registry. It started with signatures. We've seen that this has more general usage, whether it be SBOMs, security scan results, other signature formats, content that we don't yet know of, because that's the whole point. We're trying to enable an ecosystem with a set of use cases that creates a pattern for others to use. We've been refactoring that reference type work out of Notary. So you're seeing some of, there's two things that's happened. The services side were meant to be for registries. So while we have this parallel effort with the OCI, we're using the ORAS project to have a set of services that enable the capabilities that aren't tied to Notary. And then there's the ORAS binaries that we're using, and ORAS libraries that enable general reference type capabilities that other projects like Notary, SBOMs, SPDX, or whatever can utilize. So we want to finish that factoring and get that off. That base infrastructure needs to be in place so that projects like SPDX, Notary, and others, Nidus being an example of another random one, can start taking dependency on it, and they can do their work. So we basically need to get a release out that people can start using and validate whether that we think it hit the bar for what we're trying to do for this fall, and they can validate whether it hit the bar for their particular scenarios. Some of the ones that members of the same team are on as well. So that's the why you're seeing this pushed so quick. I wouldn't call it quick. We've been working on this for, seems like over a year, at least since February or something like that. I can't remember when the first PR on this started. So that's the motivation to get closure. It doesn't mean it's done and there's no more changes. It means there's a point of stability that other teams can start building and taking dependencies on. That's the context. On the Notary call, we actually just talked about having a release bar. So having released a bunch of things at Microsoft and previous companies, it's very easy to argue every last bug and feature that you justify into that release. It helps if you come up with a triage bar. Here's what we're trying to do here. And in a month or 2 months or whatever, here's the different triage bars. So you could say, all right, I can or can't get it into this release, but it moves to this other release because that other release is tighter or more open, depending on what the bar is. So we probably need to identify what the bar we want for this release. What is this release going to be? This release being the one pending. What is it going to be used for? And what is the escape hatch for things that we say don't fit into this release? Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll take the action item to draft what should be released, and what would be in this release. Then we'll obviously have a review on that. It'll be in the project board. So if you go to the or as artifact specs, there is a project board that's started there, and it says artifacts releases, and there's the beginning of that structure. It is by no means complete. And I'll paste this in the hack doc to have. projects. Okay. So that's that, and maybe that's, so I was going to triage a list of issues, and that becomes hard to triage a list of issues when I just said we need to have a bar. Rather than triage them for a particular bar, maybe we can just have a discussion around them to figure out, what is the level of concern, disagreement that we think we need to close down on these. And I'll start sharing my screen so I can point to stuff and easier have a conversation. Give me a second to make sure I'm sharing the right windows here. Okay, hold on. Doesn't refresh. That's strange. There we go. Okay, and let me just tear this off. All right, folks with me? I think I'll just work from the bottom. So we know we wanted to get the refers API. Well, first of all, let's just start here. Like the fact that we have a merge repo, let's take a moment to celebrate. Like this has been something that Michael's been pushing for, others been pushing for. Trying to review content in PR is very difficult at best. So we now have that base in place, and now we have PRs that have started coming in, including Michael's on the balance between descriptors and every bit of content and every request. So I think we've landed in a really good place, and based on the list of PRs, we'll decide if we all think we're listed in the same place. So huge. One of the things that came out of that was the pagination conversation. I think that's been a perfect example of that's core to the API. We should land that. And if I remember, did somebody actually do a PR on the pagination yet, or there was just an assignment?
Yeah, we have the PR. Aviral submitted the PR for pagination.
So that's this one here.
That's the one.
Okay. So I don't want to get into the details here. Let's review that. Let's have the discussion there. That's certainly one that we've said that we wanted to get closed. The next one on the list is something that's come up, is the difference between what we did in the artifacts work for what we call V1 for lack of a better word, whereas you're basically using the manifest config media type, which is got us to where we did today. It validates things because it's a media type. It does follow the IANA format of application /. And if you look at the artifact stuff, there's specific language on which ones to use based on what IANA does and how you go submit it to IANA to have an ownership of it. When we were doing the artifact type, there was feedback, and I honestly just don't remember who it was from. Do we need to do the full IANA format with application / VND? And it's not always VND, it could be X. There's a couple of different things, and that confused the hell out of people what exactly they're supposed to do. And then it just started jamming in random strings. We need, at least in the artifacts work, we've specified exactly what the format is, so you can go back and point to them going, I'm sorry you did it wrong, here's the docs, and so forth. What do we want to do for the artifact type? Do we want to follow the same? I was taking the feedback I got from somewhere where it was more org, entity, project version, and it didn't have a .json on it because there is no, it's like an extension. There is no config that's associated with it. It's just an identity name. The question is this the right format? And if it is, that's great. But one of the things that I've noticed as I've been writing up how to use this thing is, let's say the Helm team wants to support reference types in addition to the Helm charts or WASM or whatever. When they're using the image manifest, because it's a media type, they have to use the full IANA format. When they start using reference types, then they have a different string format that means effectively the same thing. Neither one of these are things that end users are going to want to see anyway. The end users are going to see Helm, Notary, SPDX SBOM. They're going to want to see a localized string. And there's a different PR that I've been, where is it? Was it a PR? Shoot, where did I put this? Okay, I have to go figure out where that was. Maybe it's, there's a way. Okay, so I have, now I'm confused where I put that one. I'll go back and find it. But basically, in the artifacts work, there was a document that says the Helm team can submit a JSON file that says, here's the logo to use, a path to it. Here's the localized strings so that you can actually display. So if you add a file extension on any operating system, and Mac, Windows, whatever, there's a way to register an icon and a string so it shows up in the file listings. I was mimicking that capability. So the idea is that it really shouldn't matter whether whatever the string format is, because neither are things end users want to see. There should be a way to map, like this is the unique identity. So but the way you would express it would be a different, this other JSON file. So I'm trying to figure out like, what should we ask artifact authors to use and specify. That doesn't block us shipping the API. It just provides the guidance on when we start taking content in. How do you specify what a Notary V2 signature looks like versus an SPDX and so forth? So it's not a, hey, we need to define that to ship the implementation. We need to define that so consumers can start giving us content. Make sense?
Yes.
Thank you, Tej.
Yeah, yes. I'm just looking into who is going to drive this? Like, how do we take it forward? Like, I know John, there is a comment from John to follow the existing pattern like a media type, but you are saying we will use some other pattern. Like, what's the next direction for this?
So I did assign this one to me. If somebody else wants to take it, that'd be great too. But this one I assigned to me because I've been kind of spearheading the docs for some of this. But if somebody else wants to, I wanted to put closure that it is an issue. I'll take ownership of doing it.
Sounds good.
That was the thing there. The next one in the list was the design and capabilities API. This one is another example of setting the stage for future. Like, we could always hack around stuff. And if I have a Notary client, which is, I use Notary as the standard client here, how do I know if the registry, because not all registries will support reference types right away. How do I know the registry supports reference types so I know that I can push the artifact as a reference type versus some fallback mechanism? Today, the way we've been thinking about either the refers API is there or not. And that's a pretty easy thing to do. I've tried to elaborate a little bit more, including some of the max size conversations, so that registries can state whether they support one thing or not with a little more detail. So I'm trying to flush this out. So it's something that will scale more. This is an example of something to do our initial release. I don't think we need this API, and it could take more big time. We could we could specify in the artifact spec that clients that want to test the existence shouldn't have to try to upload an artifact manifest to see if it fails. They could ping the referrers API, which is for now a hacky proxy to know whether you support it or not. Just so happens those things are coupled together. It is by no means a scalable solution. The main reason I created this issue was to have a pointer to, we recognize this is not a scalable solution. This is a solution that works for now, and here's the thought process and how we make it scalable for the future. So this issue is, again, completely open for feedback. The question is this a priority issue for us to solve now, or just a parking lot that we can point people to, because just to say, we know this isn't the best solution, it just works for now.
So in general, I don't know if I see the usefulness of this, just because, kind of like you said, you can identify these capabilities by trying to use them and seeing if it fails. And I guess maybe I lack imagination, but I kind of hope that registries generally evolve in similar, like, I kind of don't want a world where it's like okay for registries to support a bunch of different feature sets forever. And I think having a capabilities API kind of encourages this idea that like registries don't have to do everything. And I actually think we should try to evolve the spec carefully so that only things that we really need get added. And for ORAS artifacts stuff, there'll be a period of time where we are sort of operating outside of the spec, and eventually, I think we'll see whether the community thinks that this is useful enough to adopt it, and I think they will, and then other registries will add support over the next year or two.
So even in that best case scenario where there is universal acceptance that this is the right design, there's still the reality of when it gets rolled out. Now, I'm hoping this will get rolled out by registry operators pretty quick because there's a compelling use cases behind it. That's kind of the main thing. Features that don't really affect end users don't get rolled out because we're, at the end of the day, we all run businesses and we have to prioritize what our end users want.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we'll get this rolled out. But that said, it's still going to take months at best. And I'm being intentionally, pointful at best is, but we also know the reality is not all registries are implemented equally. I'm resisting the urge to want to bring up the conformance test that OCI has done to show that there's like one or two registries that actually have reasonable amounts of green across it.
Yeah. But I think if we're going to spend time, working to like either building this capabilities API or fixing our spec conformance, like I think we're going to pick spec conformance. And so like if this, like, and even if this spec or if this API becomes part of the spec, I think we're still going to pick spec conformance in ways that are more useful.
So
because
I think what you're pointing at, because this is one that I don't think we want to spend a bunch of time on right now, because I don't think we require it now. And that's actually purposely what I'm trying to get at is I don't know whether we want to have a feature or backlog milestone. That's a conversation, but I'm not going to assign, and these are placeholders. We can decide we want to name it something else. Just please view these as placeholders right now. That I don't think is a requirement for a current release. But if somebody starts poking, going, this is kind of, they don't like the pattern, like we agree, here's the thought process around a better way, but we're not working on it right now.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder what the I don't know. I think that having an answer for that kind of question is good. I wonder why we can't just throw this back to OCI and say,
I debated on creating this and I probably would create an OCI one, honestly.
If OCI, if registries become fragmented enough that this is an issue, and clients don't like the current ways that they're able to investigate capabilities, then like OCI, the distribution spec maintainers should pick this up. But I don't know, and they probably won't, because
yeah,
I don't think many people are screaming for this.
Yeah, this is beyond like the artifact or the reference artifact scope, right? It's actually kind of governing how registries would define capability. Yeah, I think I agree with Michael here. This should probably be under the OCI group first. If there is totally no room for it, then maybe considering this as a use case might make sense, because I would kind of get to the P0 of being able to implement reference types first and then kind of like look at this.
Agreed.
If we have a simple enough way to kind of detect that, yeah, you support reference types or not, and then we can come back to this.
Totally agree. So I think this is, I want to try to make sure I'm positioning stuff. Here's the things I think are really important for us to close down. I may or may not have a specific opinion on something, but there's examples of things that I think are interesting, but not important for us to solve right now, whether it's even our scope to solve. So that was an example of one. Moving on, the release versioning. So now this is the question, and this kind of does lead to needing to identify a triage bar. But let me ask a more basic question. Do people agree with my opening statement that we do need to come up with some kind of release in the next couple of weeks at best, that we could now start coding our respective registry implementations on and start accepting user data? Is ECR looking to release ECR with its capabilities in somewhere in the near future? Sorry, I'm not trying to get into my, the point of this call is this is
Does
collaborative.
Shravan want to take that?
Sure, I can take that. I mean, like the short answer is like, yes, we want to release this in the future. The thing is, we want to release it once we feel that it's ready. I know that's a subjective answer, but that doesn't necessarily have a time-bound implication on it.
So, okay, so I want to be careful, because while I recognize we might be weeks off by one or the other, where we can get into a lot of, and I'm sorry, I don't know why my video stopped working. I do need to figure that out for the next call. So I do want to drop at 8:45, just to set expectations, because I'm doing the supply chain town hall presentation with Justin, and I need to get ready for that. And figure out what's wrong with my camera. We started this effort saying we wanted to ship something this fall. We as Azure will ship something this fall. If AWS decides they're not worried about shipping this fall, and they're not going to ship it to the spring, that puts us in an awkward spot, because we do need to close down on a shippable thing. And if you guys are not in that same spot, in that same pressure time frame, off by a couple of weeks versus 6 months, then we're going to have a conflict. And I want to figure out how to mitigate. That was part of the April goal, was to agree that we're going to a set of, can you guys hear me? I'm getting errors with my microphone now.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
That we have an agreed goal, and that, because it was actually AWS folks that said, look, we're not seeing the progress we want with this, and if we can't agree, then the AWS is just going to go off and implement their own thing. We said, look, we want to ship with you. Let's agree. Let's figure out what we need, what we can't agree on by April 28th, and as long as we can, then we'll move forward. So that, if you're not willing to commit to this fall, then that puts us in a really difficult spot for how to align.
They were kind of moving the goalpost of what that original thing we wanted to ship was, right? Like, this is, I mean, we're working on this registry implementation, as well as we're working on implementation in the Notary project. Like, there are two parts to the puzzle that we wanted to ship a complete solution with everybody else this year. At least that's what we had decided like months ago, and we set an unofficial deadline. I think it was April 28th or something, to see if that's still feasible or not. I mean, and that deadline had passed a while ago. But like, what are we, when you say you want to ship something this year, like what exactly does that mean? I mean, we're only in the second meeting of this, this new initiative with the ORAS project. Like, do we feel comfortable that we're going to launch something like that's production ready in the next few months?
Yes. So while I appreciate that the repo got moved to ORAS a couple weeks ago, this is not a new effort. That was just your ask to put it in a public place that we can collaborate on, which we agree. We've been trying to do under OCI, that didn't work, or hasn't worked yet. So we broke out of that. But this isn't new information. It's just a new location on where that collaboration is happening. So I guess I don't understand the statement that this is new. It's not new. It's just the location where we decided to collaborate on is new.
What about is the notary side also ready to launch something this year? Like that, I haven't heard that the same level of confidence from that side.
We actually had more confidence from the notary side in the sense from Niaz and their team in the sense of what the randomization that we've been getting from external entities. Now we have to close, and part of what we're doing to close is solve what we did here. Like we were not able to get a comfortable set of maintainers that we felt we could make progress under OCI. Everything was getting filibustered by a group of folks that were building a competitive solution. So there was a huge conflict of interest there. So the resolution was we have an org under CNCF that we can collaborate in a mutual collaborative form. We don't have that finalized with Notary yet. That supposedly will get done this week. And if it doesn't, then the crypto side of AWS and us have said we will spin up another effort and so that we can get it out without being blocked. Justin has come back and he feels highly confident we will get that closed. So I'm not worried about it. And we do have to close on what that scoping is going to be, the exact same conversation that kicked this off here.
I mean, is Justin on the call? Like, is Docker Hub also willing to commit to a launch this year? Like I haven't heard that from them in a long time either.
Yeah, Justin's definitely struggling with resources. He's from a business perspective, he wants to. He hasn't said one way or the other. He's just said that he's actively trying to hire, and that's where they're at. But
Yeah, I mean,
as you guys have ECR public and we have MCR, like Docker Hub is not a blocker.
I mean, that sounds like best intentions to me. And I think the original agreement that we had months ago is that all three of us would launch at the same time. Like, I agree with you that, just ACR launching on its own and then ECR coming later and then Docker Hub coming whenever, like that's not as strong of a message to the community. Is best if we launch this in partnership together. But I mean, like Michael, what are your thoughts on seeing like this ORAS effort? Like we all need to come to some sort of consensus on like what this is going to be, right? We're still deliberating, we're still submitting PRs and whatnot. How much longer is that going to take? And then even after that, we'll have to implement it in our own registries, in 3 different registries.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is probably a little bit of a difference in perspective. We made comments on some of the PRs that were in the OCI repo, but I don't actually feel like we were iterating on that very much. Like it seemed as though because we didn't have this location, it was more than just we weren't able to merge anything. Like I actually think it was really hard to discuss the individual issues at all. And maybe there was thinking going on internally for you all that was helpful, but I think we missed out on some of that. And so I think this ORAS project feels different and feels new. And I think that we have, at least another few issues that we would like to like sort of discuss related to some of the manifests requirements and lifecycle management. And I know that these are things that have been discussed before, but I also think that these are things that are not totally clear in the spec yet. And so I think for us to be, I think we would at least want the time to like discuss those, which feels like something that maybe we start filing issues in the next week and then have those discussions and maybe talk about them at our next meeting and hopefully have PRs, in like 2 or 3 weeks.
So just for the couple of minutes that are left, because for me, I have to drop off and prep. I think let's make sure. So I want to do 2 things. One, I want to revisit our April 28th commitment to make sure that we are aligned. Because if we're not with the same sense of urgency, that's going to be a big problem that we're going to constantly be battling against that in every conversation we have. Like we are actively making changes on a daily basis to make sure that we can ship. The presumption has been that was what AWS said they wanted to do as well. And that was the conversations from Omar and Nick in subsequent. If that's changed, that's fine, right? That's your business's decision to do, but it puts us in a spot where we can't get stopped because we're on different priorities. We want to do everything you can. Like we're doing all the work in distribution and we've done the prototypes in NV2 and so forth in the public view, so that I feel like we are making all the right, a large set of commitments to delivering on this to help enable others is kind of what I'm getting at. But I think we have to close on that. And if you want to ship this fall, but there's some blockers, let's identify what those blockers are, because this is not something I'm trying to do as a product competitive leverage over AWS. We've always said this is something that should be standards across the industry. We're also having Docker endorse it, whether they implement it or not is a goal, but if it doesn't happen, we've all recognized that it's.
Yeah, I don't think that last part is true. I think they were part of that original agreement. So like if they're like that, at least that's my understanding. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that it was all 3 registries would be in this together and launching. And even
we are together. The question is, when can each of us get it done? Like if I'm done next month and you guys are 2 months later, we're going to ship. Like if you guys are done within 2 days later and we want to have a PR announcement, a public relations announcement that we are able to ship the same day, I love to do that. In Docker, Justin wants to ship this. Like this isn't a matter of desire; it's a matter of where is he at with the resources that he has.
Again, again, that sounds like best intentions. Like we need a stronger commitment than he wants to do something.
How does that change anything?
Well, it doesn't give. I mean, that's not like that. That doesn't give me at least the confidence that something would happen just because the intent is there. Like, of course, we want something. Just because I want something to happen doesn't mean it will happen. That's what wishful thinking is, right?
No, the question is, at the end of the day, does AWS want to ship a supply chain reference type implementation, whether or not Docker has it or not?
Well, I mean, then I'll go back to that agreement that you were referencing. Like, we wanted to ship those together, or at least that's what we had agreed upon in April. And if we couldn't make progress in time by April, then we wouldn't do that, right? That was almost 4 months ago now.
Well, but it wasn't that we weren't going to do it. The question is whether we're going to be aligned on the common goal so the content can move between the registries and clouds, or are we going to build standalone implementations that don't match? So the question was never, are you guys going to build this? The question is, do we build it on a common platform?
I mean, I think the whole reason we're on this call is because we want to build a standard and aligned solution. Now, I think we're discussing the point of sequencing, which is when that can happen. My interpretation, though, is that it seems, I mean, I don't know how far along you guys are with implementing this in ACR, but I mean, from my perspective, like this is just the second week of these conversations. As Michael was saying earlier, it didn't seem like we were iterating much when we were creating PRs in the OCI and whatnot. So that's why I think like talking about a launch date when we're only in our second meeting of iterations seems kind of early. But I mean, I could be in the minority on that.
No, I think that's fine. Let's take this as an understanding that there needs to be some sort of reset of expectations, or because of how Docker is. So I think release timelines, product owners focus and discuss on. I think the open community discussion should be about whether the spec is right and whether we're okay with this implementation. Let's focus on that. I think Steve, Shravan, you folks, and Justin, you need to figure out what the alignment is here. Let's keep this as a technical discussion and let the people who want to make the PRs, who want to see whether this is the right opportunity to kind of like flow this to customers. That's I want to kind of like delineate these two.
I think we're discussing two different things. There's a difference between a lack of alignment that they don't agree in the approach versus the time by which they can ship the capability. We're in alignment on the approach and the execution and the design. And, you know, there's obviously lots of details that we're trying to close down on, but Justin's in full support of this. He's actually spending a tremendous amount of time that he's enabling this. So I can see it, I trust it, and so forth.
Release for the cloud is a business decision. And that fundamental discussion has changed, is what I'm hearing from what Sean is saying.
No, but that's what I'm saying. That's
Hold on.
what I'm trying to say. What has changed? There's nothing that's changed there.
No, the initial statement was that Azure, I'm separating myself from Azure. Azure, AWS, and Docker will ship. If one person is not committing fully to that, or there is risk in that commitment, then it's fair for in what you say, invested parties to kind of revisit that and think about it. So I would kind of like take that as a separate discussion, because that's clearly a business decision. Whether the community makes progress and we land the alphas and we land an end-to-end open source solution, that's a separate discussion. So let's at least partition the two so that we don't get into timeline alignment across these things as a zero progress mechanism right now. I think that's a discussion that I would like to acknowledge, at least, without kind of like saying we are doing the same thing, because there has been a change as far as I'm hearing it as well. And maybe Justin needs to speak.
What is the change that you're hearing? Because I'm not
seeing any indication that Docker Hub is going to ship this solution with us at this point. And I think I agree.
I think the question is when, and I want to let Justin answer that question. But what am I asking you is a different question. The conversation we had in April wasn't, are we going to ship capabilities that meet this user scenario? The question is, do we do it together? So my question is, and Docker wants to ship this scenario and they want to do it together with the same design because they want the content to move.
I understand.
When exactly that happens? I'm asking AWS, where is your commitment at this point? Is your commitment that it's not a priority to ship this versus you're going to ship a different alternative solution? And if that's, those are business decisions. I'm just asking, please let us know so that we can decide whether we're going to continue to invest the time in making sure we're aligned, or we do what we said we do in April, that we split off and do our own thing. I don't want to do that.
I think the best we can do is play hand open, right? We are committed to doing this. The timeline is clearly a business decision. It depends on resourcing. There's going to be a risk, but if there is an opportunity to discuss on the timeline, let everybody get in consensus, because at this point, I don't think there's enough consensus. What I'm trying to say is there are issues that we can discuss that we can still make progress, because this is a cloud-specific resourcing issue versus the spec that we will have to ship in some way. Like from Azure side, I'm committed. I can say that confidently because we've been driving this for a long time. And I know that internally we've made progress. So, but I think you have to understand that Docker has not publicly endorsed that this is the implementation that they're going to go after. They said they'll ship something. they could
Actually, that's not true. Justin has publicly made statements. He's done blog posts, and then it was the target of Santiago to start criticizing. Like, I'm sorry this landed this way, and I'm sorry to do it this way. I have to drop because I always have to reboot to figure out why my device isn't working. If you guys want to continue, that's fine. I think we need to have a
Can we
product
continue on
partnership
this
level
call once you drop off once the host leaves the meeting, it ends, right?
I don't know, but I have to go. So if that's the case, I'm sorry.
Before you go, let us, the AWS side, get back to you on a better answer in terms of timelines. I guess Sajay is saying it is a business/cloud decision. Like I can't tell you a timeline right now. I don't have anything in front of me that can say like by this date we're going to launch something. You know, we need to talk with our engineering team to come up with something better. But I do endorse what Sajay was saying, though, that we would like to see a stronger commitment that, I mean, best intentions is fine, but like if Docker is planning on launching something that's using this year, like are they going to, come and resolve these technical questions, these PRs and whatnot? Like what is the, I just haven't seen that confidence yet, other than just I think you're referencing that blog post that was posted a few months ago, which received a lot of criticism in the notary community.
Yeah, but I don't care about the notary. We care about our customers. So I have to go.
Again, like
I have to go. I'm sorry. I don't want to be rude. I'm just telling you, I'm hanging up. Hopefully you guys can continue the conversation. I'll catch up with Sajay later.
Steve's video is in trouble for his next call. Oh, actually the call didn't end. No, hold on. Let's see.
I don't know if he left yet.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
I agree, though. I think these conversations should be focused on resolving the issues in the project itself, and deliberating and discussing how to move forward to get the spec to an agreeable place by all the parties.
Agree.
Yeah.
I'm totally in agreement.
I think I agree with what you're saying. I think this is something that probably outside of this call, you guys, us, maybe Docker, whoever, should have some sort of meeting. I'm not really sure what happened in April. I don't think I was part of that meeting. I don't think we hit the milestone that we set for ourselves in April. So I think revisiting that conversation probably makes sense. But then the separate question is this spec, or is this kind of repo ready to finalize and sort of stabilize? And I think the answer to that, at least for us, is not quite yet. And I want to say that and then also say, I think I'm fine with having an aggressive schedule and trying to close on a lot of these issues in the next couple of weeks. But I do think that we should recognize that this is second meeting, and we will we have some folks that are still, I think, getting their feet wet and diving into some of these things, and with all, I know it's probably frustrating for people who've been thinking about it very deeply for the last year to hear this, but unfortunately, I think
we've had new people join in as well.
Yeah.
I need to make
Cool.
sure that, I'll give you an example. Teja is literally new to this one. She's also ramping
Yeah.
up. She kind of called me on the side and said, "Give me some time to just understand." I think it's totally fine.
great.
Steve has been on this, and probably he has a motivation to get this landed as a PM hat, right? You want to get stuff and everybody launches this together. That's a great place to be. But I'm coming from the technical side, where I'm trying to explain in terms of let's solve the spec so that when we push this to OCI, it's not going to be so broken that people are not going to have too much trouble. But that said, I want to probably highlight a couple of things that we discussed as well, so that we can describe how the end-to-end is working. The entire Notary project is kind of hinging on this one. So container signing bets that artifacts can be referenced. So all the scenarios that are being built on top of that. My team is committed to making sure pre-releases for those binaries will happen. I'm actually investing into getting that done. Our team will support releasing the bits for NV2, releasing the bits for ORAS with these things. That's my commitment. I think most of the stuff that we want to discuss here is agreeing on the server API so that when we move the signature, at least we can handle cases that one implements or the other. And we're trying to bake in as many fallback mechanisms as possible so that everybody doesn't have to implement everything. And even we won't get to implementing everything. But if you can get to a common set that this is the minimum that needs to happen, then we just do that. And then the rest can be slowly, we can iterate on that as needed. And we don't plan to, I don't think we have a timeline for GA or anything, but we do want to get to maybe a private preview or public preview. That's the ambition, but that's separate. That's an engineering discussion or like a business discussion. Let's have that separately. But that's commitment from my side, if that helps anybody to understand where the end-to-end lies.
Yeah, I think that's helpful.
All right. So do you want to kind of like, how much time do we have? We have 8 minutes spent on this. So can we, do you want to touch base on the Pagination PR? If there's any big concerns on that, we can maybe discuss that if needed, if possible. Avril, can
I
you?
haven't gotten a chance to look at it yet.
Okay. Avril, do you want to just quickly run through it so that it might help in the next call or if you have trouble projecting?
Yeah, actually, could you mind presenting?
All right.
Right now. Yeah, this is a lag.
So Jay, are you presenting or do you want me to present?
Yeah, if you can present, that would be great because I'm on a different machine altogether.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay.
So before we get into discussing this PR, I also wanted to mention another PR that I had for adding Go specs to the artifact. I think that's also something that can probably later.
Do you want to give context on that or do you want me to speak for it?
Yeah, so I think, so I just wanted to mention it, say that's there, but it's on fast. Okay, so this one basically, you know, the discussion that we had on the pagination, it's basically capturing most of that stuff. I think I've just gotten rid of the next token, response body, and instead it's gone into the link header. And yeah, it's mainly that. Other than that, adds, you know, speak recommendation for setting for data and kind of walks through what a client has to figure out whether the server has responses or not. So the link header server is empty. The client should basically infer from that there's no further results. So in short, I think that's pretty much what this PR is. It's also kind of based on E2 API for catalog and catalog.
Okay, so I think we just need give folks some time to kind of like take a look at it and then get feedback on this, right? We kind of adopted the link header opaque token feedback that Johnson was talking about and Michael was referring to last time. And okay, so then we can do the iteration on the PR itself. And
exactly.
so are you, so I think this would be a question for Michael. Do you think you can maybe take a a stab at this, just taking a look at it maybe this week. The reason I can kind of tell you is that we want to update the ORAS client to use this API and put out a reference implementation of a registry, like an open source registry that somebody can download, run the end-to-end. So that would enable storing the reference artifacts. And if we can jump back to, so the other thing is we created a fork for distribution under ORAS as well. And we publish an image to GHCR that a customer can download and run the end-to-end. So they'll have the client. So that's the motivation of getting this in, following the, because there's no easy way for a customer to kind of like, or even a developer to kind of come and play with these bits at this point. And that's what we want to kind of like focus on. After talking to Lucky last week, he was like, let's sort the release out for these bits. Let's get the docs in, and let's kind of like make sure at least there's something working end to end, and we can iterate on them as needed when we change any of these implementations. And if this is soft okayed, or people feel that this is a good start place, then Avril can follow up with the distribution changes, which will be supporting this API. His PR will kind of follow. That's what we were discussing, if that's okay.
Yeah, this,
Yeah,
I mean,
so the
I think this looks
distribution
fine.
changes is some.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Avril.
Yeah, sorry, I think we just both spoke. Go ahead.
So I was gonna say, I mean, this looks good. I'm curious if like we should include like the next token part of that link URL. Like, does that belong as part of the spec, or should it really just be registries can pass back whatever they want in the link header, and if they want to call it next token, they can. If they want to call
Yeah,
it
so
skip token, they can. Doesn't matter.
So if you see here an example token, it includes the next token as part of query string. Yeah, it's up to the registries to include the continuation token in whatever way they want, but include the full URL as part of the link header. That's the idea.
So the value of the
Basically,
URL is
clients should just treat it as
Yep.
as opaque.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that it should be an opaque token. I'm curious if, like, I do think the other examples like include the name of the field that is passed back. Like, I think they use last or next or something. And I'm curious if like registries,
Right.
I don't know, I haven't really thought through it, but I'm curious if there's a reason for registries to like do the same thing with respect to how they name the field that they include in that URL.
we can even do that as an additive.
Yeah.
Avira, do you want to take up? I think that last where with respect to the lexical ordering of the results for whatever catalog or tags, which we agreed that it is
Exactly.
not applicable to this API.
Yeah, I think
And
all I'm
without
asking is,
fields-
I think the last
Yeah, go ahead. I think you can take it.
Yeah, so the last parameter I think was relevant if there's a lexical ordering, or if clients can somehow construct skipping over a few pages, jumping ahead. But I don't, yeah. The ordering basic unspecified.
yeah, I agree with that. I think what I'm asking is should we specify that the opaque token is passed back in the next token query parameter, or would it be okay for us to pass back next token and equals ABC, and you all to pass back skip token equals ABC, and someone else to pass back last equals some digest? And if they wanted to do lexical ordering, they could, and that would be basically the same thing that we're all talking about. I don't know if I really care. I'm curious, like maybe people who work with clients more, if they want to like do some validation to make sure that the next link they get is actually the right thing. It would be easier to do if they knew what the opaque token was called. Does that make sense? Like I'm not asking to document how the opaque token is constructed. I'm just saying, should that next token field be part of this spec in terms of how operators should construct the next link?
So
Or should we just let it be whatever?
Docker has a precedence of not following the domain, right? Even in the next link. For example, when the response from blob comes, it actually can be an entirely different domain. I don't know whether there's a concern with, we can start with next link is free form for now, and then the restrictions of that can come later if needed. And that's my opinion here. So, because if you kind of hit blobs, you just follow the URL as a 301 or 307 without any, I mean, you do validate in some way, but that's typically where it'll end up with. So my thinking is next link, link and keeping it as an opaque response would be probably the easiest place to start. But we can document this if needed and have an issue, or maybe follow up as a conversation that should we consider the structure of the next link. Are you looking at it for more like from a recommendation, or like do clients need, because at this point, I'm guessing we'll probably be one of the only clients to start with. So
yep, that's fine. I think I'm more just like curious if they're like, I don't necessarily care. I think what we'll do is just probably implement some sort of next token and call it next token and pass that back as a link. And yeah, so I think that's fine. I was more just like, I haven't really spent a lot of time building clients that interact with registries, and I wasn't sure if maybe somebody who would have a stronger opinion about what should or should not be in the spec in terms of that URL. But yeah, I think starting with it just being an opaque link is fine, and if people want to define it later, that should be a fine change to make, since I think we already do include guidance that like the link should just be followed, and I think you have a paragraph in there that says clients shouldn't try to construct this link on their own.
Yeah, I think I have seen two types of model in this Docker spec. One is the catalog API where clients can construct the link URL with the next and last fields. And then there is a kind of a blob upload APIs where it's an opaque and the clients are not expected to construct. They are just to use as is. So in our case, I think we are proposing with the opaque model because the next and last and all those fields are not relevant. But interestingly, I found in the spec, if you see, hopefully you can see my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
What is the screen, like the Docker API registry spec or the PR?
no, the catalog, docs.docker.com, that's the screen.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. So if you see, interestingly, Docker has this one, like the next URL being sent both as part of the response and also as part of link. But I haven't seen the distribution actually returning this next value, although it was called out in the spec. So that's the reason I think we just didn't go to include the next as part of response, just having it as part of link. And in both the cases, I think it's a full URL. And for catalog, yes, it's not opaque, clients can construct, but I think we are proposing with the opaque first, because there aren't any fields that clients can interpret and construct, if that makes sense.
Yep, I think it does. Thank you.
because John or someone from Google has
Okay.
expressed thoughts that it's good to align with what the catalog or other listing APIs are doing.
Yep. I agree with that.
Cool. I think are we 6 minutes over? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
think
good
so.
at organizing or tracking these meetings, and I'm kind of like doing the thing, which is not my forte.
All of our PMs left, and
I know.
we don't have no
Right.
sense of schedule anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably all we need to talk about. I think the PR for adding me is waiting on Justin.
Yeah, I don't want to play the bad
Yep.
cop here, so I'll get shouted at.
Yep. Yeah. Cool.
So if you're okay and kind of approve at least on your side on the PR, I think Avril will send the distribution spec PR, and we'll start getting a testable, workable registry image also this week or early next week if possible.
Awesome.
Shuey has burnt out from on call, so he's going to be oof for a couple of days.
Yeah.
But he'll come back, and then we'll get the Auras client also updated to use this Pagination API so that you can put artifacts and get artifacts and just validate and do the conformance as needed.
Nice.
All right.
Thank you.
Actually, I just want to mention the Go specs PR here as well. Folks get kind of, because the distribution changes would probably be based off.
Yeah. So this is just the spec files at this point, right? Just to kind of like kick off the distribution changes, and we can. I think this ask is more like for Michael as well, which is if you don't have any concerns on the spec files, we'll just get it checked in, and then we start the PR. But we can open issues against that. It's not like set in stone or anything, if that makes any difference. Those are just the descriptor files as well as the basic manifest schema, which has the subject.
Yeah.
It's the Go
I
file.
don't expect
It's just
I don't expect huge
Go version
changes.
of the text.
Okay, cool. So, and I mean, like, if we end up making some changes to the artifact spec, we can make similar changes to the Go, the Go files also. I imagine, we're at the point where probably 80% is going to stay the same, and so, yeah. But I think just in terms of like committing to not changing a field name or keeping
They
all
align
of
with
the
the
like,
specs at this point. I think
yeah.
we can change as needed. The point is just to kind of get the end-to-end working. These basic assets needs to be there, and then if we change the spec, we'll come back and revisit the Go file.
Perfect.
All right.
Is that Go file in the Auras project
I think
a different repo, or is that going to be added to artifact spec?
Right now it's in the artifact spec, similar to image spec. Image spec has the specs-go. The artifact specs have the specs-go. I think that's the PR that Avril just pasted, so we can iterate on that if you want.
Yep.
Sweet.
All right.
Thanks,
folks.
Thank you. Bye.